So number 15, the question says, the number of cakes needed for a party C is dependent upon the number of guests at the party G. Which equation shows the number of cakes is a function of the number of guests? So first I have the number of cakes. And then they tell me that that is C, depends on the number of guests, and they tell me that that is G. So first of all, the number of cakes, if that depends on something else, that means that this is your dependent variable, which we usually use the letter Y for our dependent variable. So then this, the number of guests, that would be your independent variable, and we usually use the letter X. Now, they've told us to use C and G. But the other thing I just want to talk about is that this dependent variable, we usually use Y, but as you can see, these are all in function notation. So instead of using a Y, they use f of C. Remember, that's really the same thing as your dependent variable. So our dependent variable, instead of using a C or instead of using a Y, they're actually going to use f of G because it's a function of the number of guests. So I know that the number of cakes I'm going to need is f of G. That's how they're going to write it. They're not going to write a Y here for the number of cakes they need. They're not going to use a C. They're using function notation. It's a function of the number of guests. So I know it's going to be f of G. So even right now, if I look up here, I know that I can eliminate A, because that's f of C, right? And here as well, I can eliminate letter C, because that's also f of C. Now, the other thing is that I already know, too, that I can eliminate letter D, because whatever your independent variable is, that should match the number that's in the parentheses for function notation. And because this is a C and this is a G, I know that that is not written in function notation, so I can actually eliminate that as well. So I already know that my answer is B, but let's take a look at why it's B. So if I go back to the problem, it says the number of cakes, and this is the number of cakes, f of G, that depends on how many guests I have, which is G. So the number of guests I have is G, and I'm going to divide that by 12. So each cake must serve 12 people, because if I take the number of guests I have and I divide that by 12, that will equal how many cakes I need. So again, just some things to point out. Function notation, remember, replaces your dependent variable. We usually use Y for our dependent variable, but in function notation, it's f of whatever your independent variable is. And in this example, our independent variable is G, the number of guests. So that's why it's f of G. So I was able to eliminate some because of that. And then also remember, whatever your independent variable is, that variable needs to be written in the parentheses for function notation. That's how I was able to eliminate this one. So written in function notation, our answer is f of G, which is the number of cakes, is equal to the number of guests I have divided by 12, which is B.